In a few days, patch 0.3 for Path of Exile 2 is coming out, and recently we got the League reveal stream with a full list of patch notes, so a lot of people have been asking me how things are looking for the Sorceress. So what I did is I went through the video and through the patch notes, and I did note down all of the changes that do affect Sorceress and the witch. So just overall caster builds. So we have just global changes, ascendancy changes, passive tree, skill balance, and some item and bug fixes. So in today's video, I just want to go over what I noted down and just basically give you an idea of how things are looking for us. So first we have global changes. So these are things that are going to affect everyone, but I want to talk about specifically what they mean for the casters. So first of all, now we will be able to use multiple of the same supports on different scales. So of course that's gonna help everyone, but this change is meant to basically make people play multiple abilities instead of just one. But for us, just to show you in game, this is my Blood Mage build. A lot of casters already were using multiple abilities. So for example, here I'm using Spark or both Storms, and also we are using a lot of triggers, so like custom crit abilities. Unfortunately, now we will no longer be able to do something like this, so we will no longer be able to use multiple triggers or overall multiple of the same ability. So this will no longer be possible. You will be able to use only one custom crit, and for example, only one Spark. But this will still be possible, so using multiple of the same skill in one trigger. I'm pretty sure this is still possible, but this no longer will be possible. But you can still use multiple different triggers like custom crit and custom ailment, custom minion death, and so on. But overall, this should be a pretty big change for us because there's definitely many times things that I would want to use just on my regular main ability and in my trigger. And if you are using multiple different triggers, then you can still use things like impetus and so on multiple of them. But of course, we still don't know how some of these supports are gonna be different. Maybe impetus is gonna be way different now. We'll have to see. But that's the first change. So yeah, we can use multiple of the same skill, and we can no longer use multiple of the same main skill in main slot. Also, we got minus 25% attribute requires for all skill and gear. To be honest, on sources, I would not really struggle with attributes too often, but of course, changes still pretty good. Usually, I would have to have around 200 int and like 50 strength, 50 dexterity. So it's not that bad for us, but it still helps a little bit. The next change is pretty big for us. The movement speed penalty inflicted by skill that can be used while moving now begins to follow slightly more quickly while using the skill. This basically means that whenever you are casting, so normally you move like this, and whenever you are casting, you're moving slower. Now you are going to be moving a little bit faster. And whenever I'm playing casters, I'm moving through a map, I'm just constantly casting all the time, just letting my sparks or frostbolts or whatever just travel in front of me. So this is gonna be very, very important for us. So we're gonna be much faster. Now, fire damage applies flammability instead of igniting. Basically, what this means is that now you have higher chance to inflict ignite the more fire damage you deal. So you will stack up flammability on the target, and the more flammability it has, it will have higher chance to ignite. But this also means that the fire ground effects and things like flame will no longer instantly ignite. So they will have to build up the flammability, and then they will ignite. And this is actually pretty big nerf for things like cast on ignite and so on, because previously you would just instantly get the ignite, so it's going to be much harder to trigger these abilities. Next one is shock and chill now last 8 seconds instead of 4, and this is another pretty big buff for us because we would shock and chill very often on pretty much most of the sources builds, especially shock. Shock is just very important. And especially if you're playing Stormweaver and you have the Ascendancy that allows you to apply 2 shocks, very often one of the shocks would fall off because it's only 4 seconds, so you wouldn't apply them that often, especially if you are maybe playing a cold build and only you are doing a little bit of lightning damage with something like wand with damage as extra lightning, so you're not shocking all the time. This is definitely gonna help us just keep shock on the targets. And chill, I guess it also helps, but chill of course is not as important. The next change is that exposure and curses are less effective on bosses by 50%, but overall all of the curses now have basically double the effect. So if you double them and then reduce them by 50%, it's basically the same effect on bosses, but they're gonna be much more effective on just regular monsters. Exposure got similar change, but it's not as consistent everywhere. So some sources are gonna now give a little bit less exposure, some a little bit more, but they still will be 50% less effective on bosses. Next, Ice Crystal now shatter instantly from hits that consume freeze. This is not that big of a change because most of the time we just kill the Ice Crystals anyway. And in case you don't know, Ice Crystals are the thing that we spawn with the Frostwall, for example. But there is actually one support in game that I actually wouldn't use that often, and it is called the uh, Crystal Verglass. This one gives you more damage the more life Crystal had that you destroyed. And normally you just want your crystals to have less life because it's easier to destroy them, but with this you want to stack as much life on the crystals as possible with things like Glacier and some other things. And then you destroy them and you get a lot of damage as extra cold. And I actually tried that, but to be honest, scaling life on your crystals just makes it pretty hard to destroy them, and usually it's just not really worth it. But now, with this change, being able to just destroy crystals instantly, so it doesn't matter how much life they have, you just use something that consume freeze. Like, for example, I think it's called Ice Bite. Biting Frost skills cannot cause freeze buildup, but you consume freeze. So you can put this on, let's say, Frostbolt or something, and you're gonna just instantly destroy ice crystals, and yeah, you're just gonna get huge damage buff. So this actually could see some play now. And this is the biggest change probably, especially for Sorceress and even more for Stormweaver, is now we have a mechanic called Elemental Infusion that many elemental spells interact with. So for example, we were shown in a video that now if you use Frost Bomb, you're gonna leave a Cold Remnant on the ground, called Infusion, and by the way, infusions are counted as remnants. You're gonna pick it up, you're gonna get infusion, and then you can use some other ability that consumes infusion and it's gonna get some buffs. We're gonna talk about that more in the skills section, but basically overall, just elemental abilities got much better with these interactions. And the last global change is swapping weapons is now instant. So of course we usually use a lot of abilities, like for example here I'm using Curse in my second weapon swap, Convalescence, and Convalescence, by the way, you no longer can use it in the second weapon set. I'm gonna also talk about that later. But yeah, there are some abilities like Temp Chain, the Sigil of Power, maybe Soul Offering. That's also above that we just use on our second weapon set. Just using them is gonna be much easier now, so you're gonna cast them much faster. And of course it can maybe make some new builds like cold/fire builds where you use one weapon as cold in first weapon set and then second as fire in the second weapon set, but I don't think that's gonna be the case. Sigil of Power is just so strong. It just gives you like 50 to 60% more damage. So it's just so strong. I don't think we will use multiple different elemental weapons as long as Sigil of Power exists. Maybe for mapping, but for bossing, yeah, Sigil of Power is just too strong. Okay, so now let's go over some Ascendancy changes. And by the way, I did not note down all of them. I only did note down the most important one, in my opinion. So first one, Blood Mage. So this is the Witch Ascendancy. Sanguimancy is now free to allocate, and also Gore Spike's application with Sunderby Flesh. So what this basically means is that now whenever you're gonna get your first Ascendancy point, you can take Sanguimancy. Let me change to Witch, Blood Mage. You will be able to take this and let's say, for example, Lich. And now you will actually be able to survive because previously you would just take Sanguimancy and you would lose your life whenever you cast spells, and now you will be able to leech it back up. So It shouldn't be as bad, but to be honest, I still think leveling as Blood Mage is gonna be pretty rough. And now we can change Ascendancy, so maybe leveling as a Lich or Infernalist is probably gonna be a better idea, but at least now it is kinda viable. And also Gore Spike, Thunder Flash change positions, which I actually kinda like because now this, if you wanted to go crit on Blood Mage, which most builds did, you kind of would just take both and you would just want to scale life. But what if you don't want to scale life? What if you want to be a crit build, but you don't necessarily want to scale that much life? Well, you can still take now Thunder of Flesh, which is going to be here, get increased base crit chance, and you don't have to take Gore Spike to scale your crit damage with life. And you can take something like, let's say your tree would look like this, so 1, 2, then 3 and 4, and you would get a lot of life from your body armor, or maybe one of these other points. Unfortunately, we still won't be able to just do something like this, where we take Lich, all of the crit nodes, and also Crimson Power. That would be OP, but yeah, we will not be able to have enough points. So this would be your choice, or this. The next Ascendancy is Lich, and Lich only got one change, but it is pretty useful one. So the Eldritch Empowerment now provides 30% more damage when sacrificing Energy Shield, and sacrificing 5% maximum Energy Shield when you cast a spell. So what this means, and this number was the same, but now it no longer makes your skills cost 5% of your energy shield, and it was 3%, so it's actually a little bit higher, so it went up from 3% to 5%. But now it makes you sacrifice instead of makes your skill cost energy shield. What this means is that basically you no longer have to have energy shield, at least from what I understand, to be able to cast spells. You still will be able to cast spells if you don't have energy shield, but if you do have energy shield, you will sacrifice 5% of it to deal 30% more damage. And this is pretty big, especially for leveling, because when you would take this as your first node, you wouldn't have that much energy shield during the campaign, so you would very often just not be able to cast spells when you get hit, for example, and you lose all of your ES. Now you will still be able to cast spells, but you will deal less damage because you will not get this buff. So it is going to be a viable option as your first Ascendancy point. And I also didn't note down Infernalist changes because, to be honest, I don't know too much about Infernalist. I have not played it really, so I don't know nothing about it. So yeah, you can read the patch notes if you want to see the Infernalist changes. Next are the Sorceress Ascendancies, starting with the Chronomancer. We are getting a new node called the Flood of Echoes, which grants skill called Inevitable Agony, which is a new curse that curses targets in the area after a delay, and it's gonna cause a portion of the damage the targets take from hits to be stored as a debuff, and then when the debuff duration expires, they're gonna take the stored damage again. So we don't know what is the number here, but I'm going to assume it's going to be probably somewhere around 20-30% damage, because that's what most of the time Ascendancies give, around like 10 to 20, I mean 20 to 30% more damage. Like looking for example at Lich, you get 30% more damage here. But you can also scale this with curse magnitude, because of course this is a curse, but I assume they also take that into the account. So maybe it's gonna be like 15%, so that with the curse magnitude, it's gonna go up to like 25, 30, I don't know, depending on how much curse magnitude you can get on your build. But overall, I think it's a very good change, because Chronomancer just overall was missing just a good solid damage node. Just to show you right now, like Chronomancer just gets like some cooldown recovery, another cooldown reduction. This is just teleports you back in time. This stops time. This just gives you slowing enemies, so just some recoup. And only these two were just straight up damage nodes, which Unleash was actually kind of weak, which this one is actually being replaced with a new one. And this one was just inconsistent, just getting 50% more cast speed every 5 seconds. So 5 seconds you have it, 5 seconds you don't have it. It still was pretty good, but not like that amazing. So overall, I'm happy with that we are getting just a good damage node. It's not really that great for mapping, but it's still good for bossing or maybe some rares and stuff like that. And Quicksand Hourglass. So this node, just show you again, this one, that would give you 50% more cast speed for 5 seconds, and then for 5 seconds you get nothing. Now gives you 60% cast speed, but it scales down to 1% over 10 seconds. So it starts at 60 and then it goes down, goes down, goes down, and then at the end you get 1%. And then when you have 1% cast speed, you have 60% area of effect. And area effect then goes down. So you either have 60% cast speed or 60% area effect, and it just goes up and down. So at, let's say, like 5 seconds, you have 30% more cast speed and 30% more area effect. So this is going to be more consistent than the all Quicksand Hourglass, because you always will get at least like a little bit of cast speed. So, and if you don't get that much cast speed, you get area effects. I think both of these nodes are actually looking pretty strong. And then the next one, which is probably gonna be my league starter, which is the Stormweaver. So Elemental Storm now lasts 3 seconds instead of 5 seconds. So previously, if you look at the Stormweaver, let me actually change back to Sorceress and Stormweaver. Previously, you would get Elemental Storm here, and if you take Rain Dancer, that would reduce your cooldown. But now we just, as a base, have 3 seconds, so basically it's kind of like getting 2 points for 1. And the second point, which used to reduce the cooldown, now gives +1 to limit of elemental skills, which, to be honest, is not like that crazy. I'm pretty sure that Elemental Storm has a limit of 1. I'm actually not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. It kind of makes sense, so that the second point just gives you a +1 Elemental Storm, so you can do it for that. But you also can get some other skills, like, for example, Orb of Storms. With this, you will have 2 Orbs of Storm, and so on. So it has some uses for some builds, but I think overall is probably not gonna be that amazing. But we'll have to see. Force of Will now grants 20% of damage taken from mana before life and 20% increased magnitude of Arcane Surge on you per 10% missing mana. So this is this node, which used to give just increased Arcane Surge per maximum mana. So overall, it's still gonna give good amount of Arcane Surge effect, but it also is going to give you 20% damage taken of mana before life. So this is going to let you get 100% of damage taken from mana before life without just taking Mind Over Matter, which would reduce your mana recovery rate by 50%. So you can get like some other nodes like this, 20, actually not this one. This one, 4% damage taken from mana here. There are some other nodes, so yeah, overall, it should be possible to get 100% damage taken as mana before life much easier now. The next one, Scouring Winds, now grants remnants you create, and remember that the new infusion stuff count as remnants, reappear once after 3 seconds after being collected, instead of giving the exposure. So actually losing exposure is a pretty big deal. That was a lot of damage, but the new remnant stuff is looking pretty solid. But to be honest, this is kind of bad for mapping, because of course if you pick up remnant, you probably just move forward and you will not want to just wait 3 seconds for the next remnant. But you can also use it for different remnants like mana remnant or some other ones. So overall, with good amount of remnants, it can be pretty good, especially for bossing. Because when you are bossing, you are in the small arena, so this way you'll be able to generate way more of the any remnants, so infusion stuff and so on. It basically doubles the amount of infusion stacks you can get from picking up. And I'm pretty sure this counts only for the ones that you pick up, because yeah, these counts are remnants. And you can actually get infusion stacks some other ways without picking up. I'm gonna talk about that in a bit, but yeah, basically doubles the amount of remnants you get from picking up, but pretty much just for bossing. And the last one for Stormweaver is Heart of Storm, which now provides 50% chance when collecting an infusion to gain another infusion, instead of giving 40% elemental damage taken recoup. And to be honest, this was very weak. I tested it sometimes, it's just not good. So I'm happy that they changed it. But this is actually looking very good, because it gives different elemental infusions. So let's say you are using a lot of fire abilities, but you need lightning infusion, and you don't really have any good sources of lightning infusion. This way, you can generate fire infusion through your fire abilities and still occasionally get lightning infusions, because it is 50% chance to get a different one, and it can be lightning. So I think this is actually going to be very strong, especially if you're playing a build that collects all three different types of infusion. This is then straight up just 50% more infusions. So yeah, it is looking very, very strong. Overall, Stormweaver is actually looking very nice. You still are able to go for like the shock stuff. You can still get Arcane Surge and scaling away mana. Now Elemental Storm is looking very strong, especially now with being able to use multiple supports for different abilities. Now you can use a lot of damage abilities for Elemental Storm, which previously you would have hard time because you would just run out of them. And also the Heart of Storm and Scarring Winds are now the Remnant nodes. So if you go for some Remnant build, you can also go for them. So yeah, this is actually looking very, very strong. I still think some of the cold ones should get a rework maybe a little bit, but overall Stormweaver looking very, very solid. Now let's move on to the passive tree. And unfortunately, we still don't have a full passive tree. There's a lot of changes to the just small nodes. I'm pretty sure there's 25 new nodes just for the Sorceress area. So, and we still don't know what they are. So there's going to be a lot of changes. Hopefully, we will get them before the patch release. But this is what we know so far. The elemental equilibrium keystone now causes infusion remnants we create to be random elements. So this is again very good for something like Heart of Storm when you want a different type of infusions and you don't have a good way to generate them. But one issue with that I have is that elemental equilibrium right now is in this area. And I couldn't find on any video where it is. Is it now maybe changed? Maybe is it somewhere on the Sorceress tree? But I just couldn't find it. So I guess we have to see if it changed positions. Because if it didn't, this is a pretty awkward place to travel to get it. So hopefully it's somewhere at the top. Blackflame Covenant now converts fire spells damage to chaos, and Ignite now deals chaos damage. This is kind of good now with fire damage. So let's say Fireball or Flame Buff, like that, you'll be able to do chaos damage and ignites. And this is pretty good if you can also get sources of Wither, because then you can just scale your damage even further. But one thing to note here is that it only converts fire spells. So if you play, let's say, Frostbolt, and you convert your Frostbolt damage to fire, and then you would want to convert from fire to chaos, actually cannot do that because this only converts the fire damage spells. And also, I'm pretty sure in PoE there is no double conversion. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, this only works for fire spells. So we will have to see how good it's going to be in the next patch. But fire spells got a lot of big buffs. So this actually could be a very popular node that people will take. The next one is Ritual Cadence, which causes invocation spells to trigger every 2 seconds on use. And they consume 50% less energy. So if you don't know what invocation spells are, basically it's the trigger skill. So just like Cast and Crit, there is also Elemental Invocation. And the way it works is you can get up to, I think, 5 stacks. So anytime you do any elemental ailment, so fire, lightning, or cold, so shock, chill, or no, shock, freeze, or ignite, you generate energy for the invocation. And then once you get enough energy, you can just use it to cast a spell. So usually what people would do it with Comet, and you would just use like 5 comets in one click to just do a massive burst of damage. But with this, now what you will be able to do is trigger these comets every 2 seconds instead of just casting all of them instantly, which actually is pretty good for mapping. You can do invocation with something like, I don't know, let's say Spark or Arc, and then you can just click it, run through the map, and every 2 seconds you'll just automatically cast that ability, which is gonna be pretty nice for basically having like an auto bomber playstyle. Sanguimatic Rituals. Arcane Surge now gives life regeneration instead of mana. To be honest, there's not that many sources of life regeneration in the game, and it's usually not that crazy strong, but I don't know. Maybe it will be good. As of right now, I don't think it's gonna be that crazy strong, especially because scaling Arcane Surge with something like Stormweaver is not that effective because you're gonna go for Energy Shield probably anyway if you go with Stormweaver. On a Blood Mage, this would be good, but then you can't scale Arcane Surge effect that well. So yeah, I guess we'll have to see how good that is. but yeah, I don't expect it to be that great. Archon nodes convert, there are basically 3 new Archon nodes. So there's Fire, Cold, and Lightning node, which convert all elemental damage to that one element. So Archon of the Storm converts all spell damage to Lightning after spending 100% maximum mana. So all of these are supposed to have different triggers. So this one is for mana. We don't know what are the other ones and where are they are on the tree. But this is definitely going to be used, like all 3 of them, depending on what build you are playing. Previously, if you wanted to convert your elemental damage, you most of the time would use something like Call of the Brotherhood ring, which just convert elemental damage to either, I'm pretty sure it's cold or lightning. So, or the gloves to convert damage to fire. But with this, you no longer have to use these uniques, so it's gonna be much easier to do that. Elemental Practitioner gives 40% crit chance if you trigger spell recently, and meta skills gain 30% increased energy if you critted recently. So it's pretty strong, just overall damage, crit chance, increased energy if you are triggering, so just very good node. I'm pretty sure it's on the right side of the tree. And overall, sources of increased area of effect have been lowered by 25%. So for example, here and here you will get 25% less AoE, which is kind of sad, to be honest. Scaling increased AoE is already kind of rough. We only have these 2 wheels, and there's pretty much nowhere else to scale increased AoE. But that's probably what they want. They want area to be smaller. So I guess that's something we have to deal with. Okay, and now the biggest section, the scale balance. I'm gonna try to just go over it pretty fast because there's just a lot of numerical changes, and yeah, I'm just gonna go over the most important stuff. So just global change to skills, spells overall should deal around 5% more damage at level 20 and up to 20% at level 30, if they are not noted down here in terms of like damage changes. So overall, more damage for spells. I mean, that's just pretty good, especially because we are scaling levels in most of our builds. So this is pretty nice. And on top of that, skills that cost a lot of mana, so well, spells at levels 21 plus now will cost less mana. And this is a huge deal because in 0.2, most people would just play Blood Mage because Blood Mage just converts mana cost to life with Blood Magic, and then you just release your life with the Blood Mage node. So this is an easy way to just solve your mana issues, and other Ascendancies kinda struggle with that. You can still go for something like Recoup Mana on Chronomancer, which is something I tried and it's actually pretty good, but something like Stormweaver, you just invest crazy amount into mana regen and you still can't sustain your mana. And I would get a lot of questions like, how do you sustain your mana on my build? And the answer is, you just don't. There is just no way to do it. But now, hopefully, we don't know still what are the numbers. It might be like 10% less, might be 20, might be 50, might be 90%. We don't know. But yeah, hopefully this is gonna be much better this patch. Blink, Convalescent, and Sacrifice can no longer be activated in specific weapon sets, so you have to use them in both. So no more free Blink and Convalescent by using them in your second weapon set. So that's one of the big nerfs that we are getting. But now we'll no longer use multiple custom crits and stuff like that, so you can just use your regular spirit to just use them. Next is these skills. So the skills that you get from the weapons, so wands and staffs, deal 12% more damage. To be honest, all of them are kind of bad, and I think they still will be bad. 12% is not that much, but some of them also got changed. Maybe Solar Orb will get some use, maybe the Lightning Bolt or Freezing Shards, but the most promising one is definitely Solar Orb. Frostar, that's a new skill. I'm pretty sure you get it very early on, probably even in Act 1. And the way it works is you just conjure the ice projectiles, you just shoot them. So it's kind of like an ice lance. You shoot projectiles, and then you consume the cold infusion to basically just shoot even more projectiles. So you shoot like some explosive stuff, and they just on the ground, and they just explode. So I think this is gonna be a strong single target damage, and that's what cold abilities kinda needed. If you played something like Frostball, Cold Snap, you would have decent clear, decent damage as mapping overall, but you would not have that much single target damage. So hopefully this is gonna help with that. especially for the campaign. Siphon Elements is a new aura. Costs 30 spirits. I assume you'll be able to get it very early. And you have a chance to create infusion whenever you freeze, shock, or ignite. So this is going to be probably a staple for most of the uh, caster builds because, yeah, this is just an easy way to generate your infusion remnants without having to just pick them up by using specific abilities. Arc is now per projectile, so it gets some new scaling options. It now changed to 6 to 9 times. Has a more shock magnitude, which, especially if you play something like Stormweaver with double shocks, is gonna be pretty big. 50% is a lot of damage. And consume lightning infusion to just deal more damage in 10 additional times. And overall, the damage of arc has increased by around 30 to 40%. I didn't put in like numbers, like from how much to how much. It's just overall percentages. But it no longer causes explosions against shocked enemies. It had some like weird interaction where it would like shoot arc, it would deal damage, and then it would like explode, deal additional damage. It would do a lot of damage. So I think these are just gonna counter each other. So you no longer explode, but you deal more damage. So it's still gonna be good, especially with increased shock magnitude. You actually might want to just use arc as like a secondary ability just on boss, just to inflict big shocks, especially because shocks are now 8 seconds, and then use maybe different ability to deal damage. Or maybe use Arc to trigger some cast on crit stuff, or maybe Quarrel Storm's Amulet to trigger Lightning Bolt, and you just use Arc to do bigger shocks. Archmage got buffed from 3 to 4%. It's still not like amazing, but maybe some people will now actually play Archmage builds in 0.2. No one played it. Ball Lightning now can consume Fire Infusion to leave a trail of ignited ground and explode at the end. So this is pretty much similar to Frostbolt. So yeah, it's gonna explode at the end of its travel. We don't know how much damage it does, but maybe it's gonna be pretty good to deal damage now. Blink doesn't count as dodge rolling. What this basically means is that you no longer can use it with cast on dodge, which was actually one of the most powerful builds in the game, but also one of the most expensive ones. It was basically an auto bomber build. You would just blink around to deal damage, and yeah, it was very fast mapper. So it no longer exists, and now has level gem level of 8 instead of 14. So you can get it much earlier in the campaign. So that's actually pretty good. This is a pretty big change. Cast on freeze, shock, and ignite now I'm combined into one single skill, which is cast on elemental ailment. It requires 100 spirit. I'm pretty sure cast on freeze would be 60 spirit, so it's actually more spirit now. And it requires higher level. But now you can proc it from all 3 different ailments, which is gonna be huge, especially if you play Stormweaver. Again, you can get shocks from Shaper of Storms while we are still getting freezes, and maybe get some damage as extra fire and also get ignites. So you just get a lot of procs from this for this trigger. Chaos Bolt, granted by a Wither, now inflicts Withers. So this is actually good for leveling with Essence Drain. Now you'll be able to just inflict Withers on the like early levels, just cast your Chaos Bolt and yeah, get some Wither stacks. And of course, you can still do it in the end game, just if you don't have anything to cast Chaos Bolts. Cold Snap is now Snap, and one of my most popular builds is the Cold Snap Frostbolt. So this is a pretty big change. Now can use be on any orb or any frozen shock or ignite enemy. So not just frozen enemies, you can use it on any of them. And creates remnants to the corresponding type of the enemy. So if you freeze, let's say you use Frostbolt, then you use Cold Snap on the frozen enemy, and you get the Cold Fusion. And cold explosions deal less damage. Overall, cold snap has been nerfed, but you can use it on shock and ignite. And explosions can chain react now. So basically, if you detonate one frozen enemy, it's gonna move on to the next one, next one, next one. Previously, you would use it with something like Unleash, and you would detonate only 3 targets with Unleash. But now you can actually detonate multiple of them. So that should be actually pretty good for clear. Comet surprisingly got buffed. It was already very strong, and now it deals 17% more damage and can also be fire infused to deal extra fire damage. This is actually interesting because you wouldn't expect this to just turn into fire ability, or I guess just extra fire damage. Usually you would combine cold and lightning whenever I would play Comet. So this actually is gonna be interesting like a mechanic to just find a way to generate fire infusion, which is actually where things like new Storm River Ascendancy points might be helpful, where you can just generate cold infusions and then you have a 50% chance to collect different infusions, so you'll be able to get fire, and this way you'll get fire infusion for Comet. Or you can convert Comet to fire damage with the new Archon stuff, so overall all of your damage from Comet will be fire, and you just do fire damage and yeah, get fire infusion this way. So overall, pretty good change. Ember Fusilade can be infused with lightning, and if you do that, then it's gonna also cast some lightning chains. I haven't played really well Ember Fusilade, but it was pretty good ability already, so now it's gonna be even better. Fireball. Actually, this is a big one. I actually think Fireball might be very good for leveling now because it only requires gem level 3 instead of 9, so you can get it very early. And now it consumes fire infusion to create the secondary fireball projectiles. Previously, it would just do it as a default. Now it requires infusion, but now it deals the primary projectile, so the main one deals 50% more damage, and secondary, depending on the level, deals 2 to 3 times more damage. So fireball is just crazy damage ability now, but you need to consume fire infusions. But now the fire bomb generates fire infusions, and basically we're shown on a video where you can just cast a fire bomb on a target and then detonate it with the fireball, generate infusion, and then your next firebolt is gonna just create a lot of projectiles. And this is basically kind of like a Frostbolt Cold Snuff gameplay, but here just a fire bomb. I think it's called Living Bomb actually, and fireball gameplay. So it actually might be a very good build, especially for leveling. Firestorm now consumes every elemental infusion type. So again, going back to the Chronomancer, generating a lot of different infusion type might be good for Firestorm. It causes the storm to also create like cold and lightning projectiles, and also increase in size and so on. So you can just create a massive storm with all different elements. And then all of the different curses that would inflict fire, lightning, and cold reduce resistances now are a single gem. So elemental weakness, you just inflict all of them. And this combined with the exposures, which are also just regular exposure, all of the exposure sources are now just all of the elements, makes it so you no longer really will care if you get, let's say, a wand or a staff with as extra lightning, as extra cold, or as extra fire. Previously, you would care. You would want it to be your main element because you wanted to for it to also be affected by curses and exposure, but now you no longer really care. You actually will want to have different element types, so you can inflict different ailments, so you can also generate different infusions. So I think this is gonna create definitely the like multi-element type of builds. Flame Wall can now consume lightning infusion to grant you additional lightning damage, as well as fire. This is going to be strong for leveling, playing with Spark, which already does lightning damage. This way you will do even more lightning and also fire. Frost Bomb now deals 25% less damage, which is surprising, to be honest. It was decent for leveling, especially like Act 1. Now it's gonna be a little bit worse, and has longer cooldown. So again, pretty big nerf for Frostbomb for leveling, but it has 4 seconds detonation time, which actually is a buff for some cases, because the longer it detonates, the more often it applies elemental exposure, which again now is elemental, not just cold. So you can get all type of exposure from Frostbomb, which is again gonna be good for leveling now. Actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah, you will deal less damage with Frostbomb when leveling, but Frostbomb is gonna apply elemental exposure, which is gonna increase your damage from sparks, and from the flame wall increased light fire damage. So overall, Frostbomb is still gonna be useful, but not necessarily to deal damage, but to also inflict elemental exposure. But now it initially applies 20% elemental exposure, and then per pulse it is being increased by 2% up to 50%. And remember, it's reduced on bosses by 50%. So overall it starts with less exposure, but then it goes up to more than before. Frostwall, this is actually a pretty big nerf. Actually, might be the biggest nerf out of all of them for the Sorceress. It now deals 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds of its duration. So whenever you spawn Frostwall and there are like big enemies, it detonates instantly. When that happens, it is gonna deal less damage. So now you will actually want to generate Frostwalls like in front of enemies and then detonate them yourself or by monsters running through them. 0.5 seconds actually not that long, so it's not gonna be like that much wait time, but yeah, you will now have to position them a little bit better. Especially for bosses, if you cast them on like a big boss, it's just all of them instantly are gonna detonate and do no damage. Frostbolt. The base projectile speed has been lowered by 20%. This is pretty annoying change. Frostbolt was already kind of slow, and now it's gonna be even slower. I used to invest into projectile speed already on my Frostbolt builds. Like, I'm pretty sure there is some increased projectile speed here. I would get that if I went to this area. And now I think I will be forced to get this projectile speed. I actually used to not take it. I think my projectile speed would be good enough, but I think now you will actually be forced to invest even more into the projectile speed. But we'll have to see how supports are different. Maybe supports not now give more projectile speed, so maybe it's still gonna be good. But the big change is that it no longer leaves chilled ground as it travels. And it is huge because of the performance. A lot of people would complain that they don't want to play the build because it's just very bad for performance. And it would be, I think, mostly because of the chilled ground. You would just see chilled ground everywhere and also would make your screen very bright. It was just annoying. So I'm actually happy that it no longer leaves the chilled ground, even though it's actually a nerf. Like, it was nice to have chilled ground to like have enemies slowed down, but you can still chill them simply by just dealing them damage with Frostbolt. And Projectile now deals 30% less damage, which might sound like a lot, but Explosion still deals the same damage. And this is actually the big part. Whenever you are detonating Frostbolt with, I guess, the new name, the Snap, instead of Cold Snap, it actually deals the explosion damage. So that's the part that we care about, and it got unchanged. And maybe it actually got even buffed because of this change that the spells do more damage. So I guess we'll have to see if it's actually better or not. But yeah, overall, Frostbolt a little bit slower, a little bit less damage with projectiles, no longer chills, and other than that, it's still the same. And you can still detonate it with the snap. Ice Nova can now consume Cold Infusion to deal more damage and create chill ground. So you can now chill with Ice Nova instead of Frost Bomb, but you can do it on demand whenever you want to with Cold Infusions, not like Frostbolt where it would always happen. And also it deals more damage, but we don't know how much more with Cold Infusion. Incinerate, it's actually kind of complicated change. I have not played with it and I don't really know how different it is. Now it basically is no longer gonna cost mana, but you're gonna like generate fuel by spending mana and then use fuel to cast Incinerate. So it's looking pretty weird, but overall it's also deals more damage. I guess we'll just have to see in game how it's gonna work. Lightning Bolt is now from the Quarrelstar Amulet is tagged as triggered skills, so you can no longer generate energy with it to trigger skills. So I actually was pretty sure this was already the case, that they changed that like somewhere in the middle of 0.2, but apparently not. So this is a pretty big nerf for the Quarrel Storm build, but to be honest, it's still a very strong build. It's still gonna do a lot of damage. You can still trigger custom crits with just regular crits and lightning bolts from just regular crits. It's still gonna be very strong, but yeah, a little bit nerf. Lightning Conduit now has a 6 seconds cooldown and no longer consumes shocks, but deals more damage. So you will no longer consume shock with Lightning Conduit. That's basically it. You can still just keep your shock on the enemy and it's just gonna do more damage. But I'm pretty sure the quality, which I haven't wrote down here, quality now makes it deal more damage depending on the magnitude of shock of the target. So it still is gonna do more damage depending on how big shock was. Living Bomb and Solar Orb swap places. So I talked about that earlier. That Solar Orb is now on the weapon and Living Bomb is regular ability. It's a tier 5 elemental skill gem, so you can get it kinda early. And Living Orb now no longer explodes at the end of duration, but it explodes when you deal sufficient damage to it or just killing it. So you can cast it on target, then attack it with, let's say, a fireball, and if it fireball deals enough damage, it's gonna detonate, or if a target dies. And Living Bomb generates fire infusions. I didn't write on here. So yeah, you generate fire infusion probably this way, especially during leveling. And Solar Orb just do more damage and doesn't cost mana because the abilities from the weapons don't cost mana. Orb of Storm, it basically now triggers just from spells, so you cannot use it with attacks, and also it now triggers less often, so you cannot proc it as fast as possible if you want to like generate some things from like Orb of Storm, like Shock. It's gonna hit harder, but yeah, it's gonna hit less often. Also, which means basically less energy from like generating many hits or like crits and stuff like that. Spark can be cold infused to fire a bunch of just icy sparks, which basically means now if you use Flame Wall and Flame Wall is infused with lightning and Spark is infused with cold, Spark is gonna just deal all three different damage types, which is kind of cool. Okay, so these were all of the skill changes. Now let's move on to the items. There's not that many changes here. The charm no longer ignites enemies in presence, which basically means the build where you would be kind of like a auto bomber, like a righteous fire, where you just run around and ignite everything in your presence with the talisman is basically dead. Maligaro gloves now give you crit damage 250% instead of 300. Pretty decent nerf, but I still think on something like Stormweaver I will still use it because, yeah, we don't get that much sources of crit damage bonus unless I will figure out how to get it. Deepest Tower can no longer drop. I know that some builds did use it, and I think that's the reason why it got nerfed. It's just so many builds were using Deepest Tower because it was still a lot of damage, so yeah, it no longer drops. Runes just overall got nerfed. The ones that would give energy shield now give 18% instead of 25. The damage as extra give 10 instead of 12. Mana actually is buffed, 50 instead of 35. And mana life now can be used only on body armors or helmets, but now give 3% life and mana instead of 2%. And the cooldown now can be used also on foci, and it gives 10% cooldown recovery rate, which is actually very nice. 10% cooldown, good amount. And yeah, if you get foci with 2 or even 3 sockets, because now we can get 3 socket items with corruption, you will be able to get 30% cooldown recovery rate on foci, which is actually very strong. In terms of modifiers, now overall items can get energy shield recharge, faster start of energy shield recharge, and increase the recharge rate on suffixes. You can get it now on armor on the suffixes. So yeah, previously suffixes on energy shield gear were just for resistances and attributes, and now we need less attributes. So we still need resistances, but we don't need chaos res because we are most of the time CI. So now you can get energy shield recharge rate and fastest start of energy shield recharge. So on boots, gloves, helmets, and chest. The lowest tier of modifiers to +2 skills on two-handed weapons are now +1, +2. So this is just good for Act 1. If you find a staff, it's always with the +2 skills, it's always going to be +2 instead of +1. Just good for Act 1, basically. And overall, ones got nerfed. The increases to crit chance and also foci now give less. So previously 100%, now 70, but stars got buffed. Basically, they give more damage. Previously, most people would just use ones and foci because numerically you would just get way more stats on them. But now it should be kind of equal, where staffs are similar to the wand plus foci. But I still think most of the people will want to go for wand and foci because it is more versatile, I guess. You can also get more energy shield if you are using focus, and also you can still use a scepter, stuff like that. But of course, you have to craft 2 items. So yeah, that's a difference, I guess. I think staffs might be now very strong as like an early option, and then in the like super end game, you will also want to swap to wand and focus. For bug fixes, this is a bug that I didn't know about. additional shock from the Ascendancy from Storm River. So this one, the one that you get from here, were not considered as a shock, and chill for the other Ascendancy, which is kind of interesting. So if you had it and you had some effects like, I don't know, increased damage if targeted shocked or something like that, it actually would not work. If the first one, let's say, you consumed the first one and second one was still there, yeah. So there are like rare scenarios. So overall, damage increase, but yeah, in very like rare scenarios. And fix the bug where lightning bolt was not considered a trigger skill. So if you actually, I actually saw some build people going for, and even I was going for things like trigger skills deal 45% increased damage, or maybe even on jewels. It actually didn't work for the lightning bolt. So yeah, now it actually will work. And yeah, that's basically it. Overall, my judgment is that Sorceress is actually looking very strong. It should first of all be way more different builds with like so many different like conversions, different infusion stuff, different element types. Ascendancies are looking much better. The Chronomancer looking very strong with like infusion stuff and all the ailments, and still Arcane Surge. The Chronomancer now with the change damage nodes actually looking also very strong, and it was already kind of good with the recoup effects. And of course, Blood Mage is still gonna be very strong. And one surprising thing, there was no changes to the Essence Drain. So in terms of leveling, I actually think Essence Drain leveling with, even as a Sorceress, leveling as an Essence Drain is still gonna be very strong. If you want to like have like a safe leveling experience, you probably should go for the Essence Drain. But if you want to try out the new stuff, yeah, maybe try out some cold or fire infusion stuff from like Firebolt or the new, what is it called, ice shards or something like that. The frost darts ability should be pretty good. And for the lightning, we still just have regular spark, or now new arc is looking actually very strong. So yeah, a lot of things to figure out, and that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.